Showtime, everyone. So a few people might filter in, that's fine, but I wanted to get started. It is my absolute pleasure to reintroduce many of us. So many of us know Mel O'Callaghan as someone who, of course, is a multidisciplinary artist who's exhibited really quite globally, and importantly also a faculty member here at Parsons Paris since 2013. I just want to say a few words introducing her, because we're going to get to, through her own words, explore her creative practice, which of course we're going to find out it spans many different fields. So video, installation, sound, painting, performance, and very importantly we're going to see through the project she'll discuss how she's often collaborating far beyond the traditional art world, right? So collaborating with scientists, ethnomusicologists, environmental thinkers, people in the health sciences and beyond. And we'll hear a bit about how those collaborations are indeed reciprocal, so it's not a one-way collaboration, of course. So since her first solo exhibition in France in 2005, her work has since been featured in many, many prominent institutions. So just to name a few, Centre Pompidou, Palais de Tokyo, MOCA in Toronto, and the Biennale of Sydney. And this is being very selective, of course. Importantly for Mel, she has also revealed how teaching is an important part of her creative practice. And I'm not sure exactly what images we'll see, but we might know or notice some of her performance pieces have in fact also invited the Parsons Paris community to participate in past years. And I had the pleasure of having a sample of that in my past. So overall, I think it's interesting in these talks to get a sense also of where our amazing faculty kind of got their creative origins. So I will mention as well that her first bachelor's degree was in visual arts in digital arts, University of Sydney. She did a second bachelor's in architecture and then a master's of fine arts at the University of South Wales. So overall, I think it's interesting to think about how her creative practice is all-encompassing, and importantly also how a kind of thread of even an ethical consideration and fostering a sense of community beyond just the artwork is also part of what Mel does in her practice. So please join me in welcoming Mel. Thank you.
So I know most of you here, so you probably already have a pretty good sense of what I do. So I thought for today's talk I might share with you a little bit more about a few of the projects specifically, and then also talk to you about some future projects that I have, and also one that I'm really proud of but I didn't get. So because I think it is really important to note that as artists or creatives we're always making work. It doesn't mean that if it doesn't get into something that it's not worthy of that, and it's important to kind of recognize those. So I can just give you a little bit of background. So I'm from Sydney originally, and I actually very luckily always knew I was going to be an artist, but I was a dancer as well, a ballet dancer, and 5 days a week during school and things like that. And so there was a little conflict between, I suppose, just being really good at something but not necessarily wanting to do it forever. But it's a good thing to think about, because I know that dance training and the choreography that's involved in that and music is so important to my practice, the way that I consider things when I'm conceiving a work. Not only just in performance but in video, etc. It's just that idea of choreographing means you can choreograph sound, you can choreograph dances or movers in any way. So, and then I got into the art school that I really, really wanted to get into, which was the Sydney College of the Arts, and I majored in photography, which is a bit strange, but again, I don't do a lot of photography anymore. But it was also before digital photography, like quite a long time before digital photography, and also before Photoshop. There was no computers, it was in the lab. I had the most amazing teacher, Stephen Lejeski, who was a very traditional photographer, amazing photographer, and I was so lucky to have him. As part of that, I also had some really important contemporary artists who were working in photography that were teaching us, and I think it was a great basis, but also we heavily focused on art theory and art history. And we could do some electives and things like that. But at that stage, I think I just was really happy to focus on something, not necessarily knowing where it would go. But in third year, I already wanted to do an exhibition, so I did my first solo exhibition. And also, which was great, is straight away opened an artist-run space. And I know I've spoken to some of you guys about how important that is to get your career going, because you're usually with a group, which gives you a really strong community, all of who I'm still very close friends with, and also gives you exposure into the art world and to meeting people, and depending on how active you are, it can really set you up for going forward. And I remember it must have been second year, because we were still at a different campus, that I asked the head of photography, Stephen Ledeski, how could I start teaching? So I really, really knew that I wanted to teach as an adjunct to my art practice. And so he told me I'd have to go and get some experience. So I went to my mum's primary school and turned her classroom into a pinhole camera with the kids. So with 10-year-olds, and then from that, I used to go and volunteer there. I also wanted to learn how to make kinetic work, so I went and worked in my dad's factory, a hydraulic engineering factory, on Saturdays, and I learned how to machine screws, how to design with him, how to weld, how to clean the toilets, like that was kind of the payoff, and that was so helpful. Also, just being in a place where there's lots of people working there and getting used to that. And then when I'd want to make a big kinetic work, everybody would just kind of start making the work in there. So it was a really lovely, already beginnings of collaboration, I think. And then I kind of went on from there, making lots of kinetic works. I think I just wanted to make things move. Of course, by that stage, it was like 96, 97. And so computers were starting. So I remember getting this insane computer, which was $10,000. It was like one of those first proper Macs where you could put Photoshop on it, and it did nothing, but it was pretty, I could see that I was trying to be professional. And but really, it didn't change the way I was making things. Like, I was still really just using 35mm or medium format cameras. So even into, I would say, 2008, I was still using medium format cameras because the digital cameras were not good enough in terms of what it was. And also same with video. When I started video, it was just digital video. The ratio was 4:3, and then moving into 16:9. So I think it is important to know about my career is that it went through a massive shift from analog into digital, and that change was massive. You're going through it now with AI, and I saw the possibilities that it gave, which is the same thing I'm seeing with AI as well. It's going to give you possibilities that can increase your productivity, but also creatively you're going to find something in that. So yeah, so that's really kind of where I got. And then I started, while I was still at uni in third year, because I'd always been working at cafes and bars, and I got a job at a cafe which was an old kind of warehouse complex that was full of artist studios, but mainly architects, designers, etc. And one of the older architects asked if I could come and assist him. He had a project with a gallery, I can't remember what it was. And I was like, sure, get me out of here. And then I went to work with him, and I just can't, things just come to you sometimes, and you have to jump on it, because he changed my life. He was amazingly generous with me, with someone who had no idea what was going on there. He taught me, we'd stay after work sometimes, and he'd teach me how to be designing, how to do architecture. I obviously showed that I wanted to be there. I think that's the thing. I was curious, and I was energetic, and I loved it. So I kind of really put myself in there. And then I was assisting him, and then I was the office manager, and then I was assisting on a lot of the design work. So I was the junior architect without a degree. So that was interesting. But again, it was analog into digital, because when I did it, it was all by hand, which I love. And I think there's something about working with hand and the way you think as you're making it that's really interesting. And so I got through that, and then I decided that I should study architecture. So I did that, got my degree, and then I just got I had to quit the job with him because my art career was really taking off, and I was way too busy. And I'd worked for him for probably 6 years at that stage. And I think he always knew that that's what I would have to do. And I got my first big solo show in an institution, and I knew that I needed to focus on that and focus on where I wanted to go with it. So I left Clark, which was sad, and I was sitting in a sushi bar thinking, oh my God, I've got no money, what am I going to do? And one of the guys I'd worked with at the architecture firm walked past and said, I've just been made head of architecture, and why don't you come and run the communications department? And I was like, I'm there. so I straight away did that, and that was 2002. And I learned on the job how to be a teacher within a university, and I had several teachers working with me, and I also taught not just in communication. Well, communications was interesting because it was by hand, everything. Montages, mock-ups, models, everything was by hand. And I actually fortunately never had to go and do CAD. I've never learned it because I don't work in it. And so, but I was also teaching in the design studios and in theory and history, things like that. And then I started working for another university at the same time, University of Technology, Sydney. So I was working with the visual communications department as a thesis supervisor, and also within the what would you call it? Design history and theory. So it was very much like design studies. So we were also doing very early kind of I can't remember what the title was. It was like strategic design, but like for the environment very early on. That was interesting, and I loved that course so much. It was just the best, and I was working with somebody who's so smart who actually went to Parsons, Cameron Tonkin-Wise.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like he was a real mentor, and tricky but mentor. But he loved me, and we had a really great relationship. And then I moved here. I moved to Berlin first for 2 years, which was really, really tough because I had joined right before I left a big gallery in Australia called Sherman Galleries. I was the youngest artist there. I felt like I'd really achieved something. I was 25 and I was doing really well, heaps of support. And then I met my partner, my husband, and he was living in Berlin, and I had the ambition to want to show more overseas and stuff, but the reality of moving to another city and not knowing anyone and not even knowing where to start, I did some crazy things, like took my hand-printed portfolio and went to some really, massive galleries. I suppose it's a learning curve now because some of them were like, please come back, we want to see more. And I stupidly took that as they weren't really interested, they were just being nice to me. Now I realize they would not say that, and I kind of missed some opportunities there. But I got an artist residency in Paris at the Cité International des Arts in 2004 through the Art Gallery of New South Wales, which is in Australia, kind of one of our state galleries, national galleries. And I came with my husband from Berlin, and I was so happy here. And he'd lived here before, and I did join a gallery while I was here, which was pretty magical. And then we moved back here, and I had some great exhibitions with this gallery. And some of the curators that I still work with now, including Daria Dubove, who curated my show at Palais de Tokyo, I met her there in my first solo in 2005 with them. And many of the collectors that I still work with collect my work since back then. I sold my first video here then, and it it was an amazing experience, and I think just that, why I mentioned some of these things is they're by chance and they're by luck, and but also me really making things happen as well. So I often see artists sometimes and I'm like, how does that all happen for you? Do things just come to you? Which is totally not true. Because if I think, sometimes I've got stuff that looks pretty great and exciting, but my God, I've like begged, borrowed, and stealed to make those things happen. They don't just come. And sometimes it can be pretty depressing, like really try and think something's going to happen, and then it doesn't, but it always kind of comes back around. So I think I've lost some opportunities sometimes, and then 5 years later that same curator or museum will come back and they've thought of me for something else. So don't lose heart. Even though yesterday I totally lost heart. But anyway, so yeah, I can show you some work. But do you have any questions before? No? Okay. Please feel free to just interrupt any time to have a nice conversation as well. So I'm just going to go through my portfolio, which I think some of you know these works. So I'm working with, I'm going to list them, video, film. I've done digital video and some pretty intense camera video too, and also 16mm. Why I chose 16mm is because it really suited the film. It's not like just choosing it because it's fun. It's usually dependent on what I'm shooting and how it goes. So I do video, painting. Painting I started doing more of about 10 years ago. I was doing it in my studio because I enjoyed it, but I wasn't really showing people, and then someone asked, was I doing it, and it kind of came out through there. So this is a large painting work, which I've shown now maybe 4 or 5 times, and each time it's changing. It's made from crushed minerals. Maybe I'll mention minerals as well. So a lot of I was talking to Lily last night actually, and she was telling me my work's a bit witchy. In a nice way, but I was thinking, well, it's quite magical. So I was thinking it's kind of alchemical maybe. I'm really interested in material or matter, and so minerals are kind of a perfect thing with that. I also spent my life growing up with minerals. My grandfather was a mineral collector, and we spent a pretty big portion of the year traveling for collecting or to mines, pretty weird places. And so it was really kind of in my system, as I think collecting is. A lot of my family are, I don't know if you say professional collectors, but their whole life is just collecting. That's it. Of course, many different things. And so this idea of, I suppose, like commitment to one thing, or commitment to a practice. And also a big part of like my grandfather's collecting was ethics in collecting. Spent a lot of that childhood in museums as well with him, and I think I kind of got a love of the place, of museums from that. So I do love seeing my work in museums, and I think that has been a real ambition, is to place them there. So this is a film I'll show at one point when we're doing questions. I'll just show some films in the background. But I shot this film in 2022 and 2023. 22 was in the middle of COVID, which was really, really tricky. But I'm going to show this work again. I showed the first chapter in 2022, and I'm showing the second chapter in 2026. Sorry, I don't know why I've got the date wrong here. At the Museum of Modern Art, just up the road. And It was a film that came out of just before COVID. I became really interested in this idea, and it carried on from a film I made, which I'll show you, that everything is alive. And you have several theories about that, and so a lot of my work is based in research and thinking through ideas, and so this idea that all matter is alive, everything within the universe, and I felt there must be some material that could speak to that in one kind of organic and non-organic material. And so I was starting to look, and I found termite mounds or ant hills. And why you could say they're inorganic is because the ants go down hundreds of meters and they bring up metals. That's why the soil is so fertile. And the termite mound itself, I can show you some photos in another film, but in Australia they can be up to 5 meters high, but essentially they're lungs of the earth because they're filtering air down into under the ground where the ants live. And then I thought, okay, well, there has to be some people worshipping ant hills because it was pretty special. And so I found a beautiful text called The Sacred Ant Hill. Definitely dated, but also really important text. And in there they said, we think there's some women in Goa still worshipping ant hills, but it was from the 80s, and I was like, well, maybe. So I got online and eventually found a short documentary, let's say 10 minutes, on YouTube, and it was by a man from the Velip community, Devedas Goenka, and then I saw he did a lot of Indigenous rights videos and whole different things about environment, etc. And so I stalked him totally and found him on WhatsApp. and then I worked very closely with my studio manager, Lisa, and we texted him, and then we waited. We could see that he'd got it. And then we waited, and he texted back and was like, you crazy girls, why are you interested? I invite you. So I didn't really know what that meant. So I said I was interested in film, etc., but I didn't assume that I was going to be able to film there, that they would just say, yeah, come and film our amazingly private ritual. It's really not assuming anything and asking questions and seeing how it is. So in more conversations with Devedas, his English wasn't great, but we managed, and I think I just got to the point of he's inviting me, these women who perform these rituals identify as ecofeminists. I would say I am myself. And so I thought, okay, kindred spirits, I'm going. Let's see how we get along. So Devedas asked, could we bring cameras? And so we went with Lisa, who I work with, and Lisa's partner Jishan, who lives in India as well. And we went to this very remote part of Goa and went to a village called Goan Kawada and met the chief, who then promptly put me on the back of a bike and took me up to where the ritual happens. And up there they'd set up all the lighting already, so they were totally ready and wanting us to film. So, but I didn't expect it would be that day. and I was like, wow. And we went straight into a 7-day festival, which is about 20 hours a day of dancing and singing. And by the last day, everybody's a little bit loose, and it's a bit crazy. So, and the festival is the women are practicing call and response singing, and they are singing songs that they've been singing, they think, for the last 1,000 years. And it's generally about their life, about their relationship to the forest, protecting the forest, harvesting, working in the fields. It's very simple, really beautiful, and very profound. And the singing kind of is interesting because they have to move forward with this song in their community. So it has to be correct to move to the next year. So they're singing back and forth. The ladies are super bossy, so they're bossing each other, who was wrong, who was right, and then you move on. And then they add to the ritual, to the song, by what they're doing that year. So our year was wearing masks you can see, because of COVID. And so part of the song is about how wearing masks is a powerful act because it saves you and protects your community. And I thought that was really interesting. That's Devadas with me and Jishan. And Devadas is coming to Paris in February, so he can, when we show the film, my film's very experiential. It's not a documentary in any way. And I prefer that he or the women present the work and talk about what it's about. And then we can together talk about our experience. And I'll be also working with an ethnomusicologist who is of South Indian heritage, and she works there. And she talks about song and listening within it's religious spaces, but it's also space can just be a place. So it's very relevant, and she's in France, which is great. So hopefully you may see Devadas if you can come along. This woman's became my best buddy, and we're still really close. Her name's Mayavati, and she was the chief woman. And that's the chief man in the front. And I went back as well because I thought that it was really important that the film was shown to the women before it was shown in any museums or exhibition. And so I went back and we showed it in the temple hall, Devadas and I, and we also showed some other things that we were doing. And we also have developed together a group, which is the women, myself, important environmentalist Rajendra Kokar and his wife, a folklorist, and together we travel trying to achieve certain environmental goals, so helping to save some of the forests, which they do through showing that they're sacred forests where you can't break or step in or anything like this. So we continue our relationship, and a part of that was also making sure that the women saw the film first and we all had a talk together. They all really, really loved it. The only person who didn't like it was the chief because he wasn't in it. I was like, oh, it is a women's festival. Like, I think, you know. So I made him his own one. It's a good lesson is, you know, people help you and they, you know, really generously share something with you. And even though he was not the focus, he was also a huge part of it. He helped me get everything, and that was important to share with him that as well. This film was a really big one for me. Question? Yeah.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Did you make the film about the chief the second time you went around, or did you take clips that you had done?
No, I went back in because to do these kind of films, it's just so much footage because you don't know what you're going to get. And so there's no like shot list, essentially. It's kind of, I go in with like an idea, a concept, but especially with something like that, I had no idea what was going to happen. And, you know, yeah, so I don't know if that answers. What did you ask me again? I'm really tired.
No, but that also is actually pretty relevant.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, yes. So I had like loads of footage and I archive everything because there's so much. All of that footage is really important. It doesn't all make it into the film. And so I always, at the end of a project, archive everything. And sometimes, like, I've donated it to a museum or given it back to the organisation. They also all have it, like Devadas has it. So I could quickly go in there and find, like, shots with him. I used to call him the peacock because he just, like, pranced through. So I made sure there was stuff for him. Yep. Okay, so this work, Centre of the Centre, I really came to this work with certain questions. I had done a show at Palais de Tokyo, which I'll show you, which I shot in Borneo, and at the end of that I really had some questions about life, and where it came from. And I was also having a child with a surrogate mother at the same time. I'd gone back to Australia and found a mineral my grandfather had given me when I was little, and it had water in the mineral. And the kind of realization that there was water in it that was millions of years old, well, what was in the water? What was the potential of that? If I broke it open, would there be some crazy new life coming out? And so it all kind of coalesced, or these experiences or these things in your world come together. And actually a conversation, I had a curator come to have a meeting with me, and this is amazing, I hadn't really put it together, because she is the curator I'm now working with at Musée d'Art Moderne. So, you know, these conversations, they happen into something. So I started looking up and researching origins of life, new life, etc. I think the first kind of place I found was that in the Philippines, or around the area of Philippines and neighboring countries, is an area they call the Coral Triangle. And scientists often call it the center of all marine biodiversity. And I was particularly interested in some weird slugs called nudibranch that are pretty amazingly psychedelic, and so I wanted to go there. Then I also found that there was a place very, very deep under the sea where scientists believe all life began, and it's where hydrothermal vents are. If I can see one in here. Yeah, these are hydrothermal vents. There. So they're at the bottom of the sea, kilometres down, and they're like cathedral mountains kind of thing. And out of them is coming this gas, which is 450 degrees, hitting 2-degree water. And there is a space between the water and the gas, which is the perfect kind of soup for life to begin in. And also, if you think of Earth 4 billion years ago, it was hostile. There was nowhere really you could start life, but under the sea was a nursery, really. And then you find these gases, you find the right heat temperature, and life can begin. So they cannot prove it, but they can hypothesize it, and they do believe that's the case. And so I was able to contact a woman called Anna Louise Reisenbach. I found that she was one of the only female chief scientists that goes down in the manned submarine down there with the US Navy. And so I reached out to her. I sent her the film I'd done previously, a couple of links, said, you know, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Would you mind having a call? And we just completely hit it off. She had watched the films before and said, this is perfect. We don't want anyone coming down and doing a documentary. It's never right. And what we're seeing down there is so crazy. We don't, as scientists, know how to explain it. That's a perfect matchup because science communication is so important. And so we'd kind of found a way to move forward together. And then, sadly, when I was going to accompany her on a ship, I stupidly said no because my daughter had just been born. And then I went back out into the lounge room, and my husband was like, did you just say no? And I was like, yeah. He's like, call it back. So you're never going to get this experience. So I did, and by that stage, 5 minutes later, my place was gone. It's very difficult. A lot of scientists work their entire careers to get out there, and a birth is like $1 million. You know, it was... Anyway, thankfully, she knew how much I did want to go. It wasn't out of disinterest. And so she kind of just called all the deep sea submergent scientists who are chief scientists who take the ships out all over the world and said, we have to get her out there. And then they all did work together. And I went out with Dr. Daniel Fenari. And he is a very special, famous deep sea scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic. But what's more special about him is he is the chief scientist for the Alvin submersible, and Alvin is the submarine that can take 2 scientists and a pilot. I think maybe you can have 3 scientists, I can't remember. And it can go down to depths of 6.5 kilometres. And And so he spent the last 30 years building it, redesigning it, making it, but most importantly for me was the cameras. So any digital camera you use under the water, he would have, together with some of the Woods Hole scientists, developed that first technology for you. And then it comes through. So every few years the cameras are then, the technology grows. And so at the end of this, the cameras that we were using, we had 7 cameras, and some off robotic arms, some off the top. And then we were visited by the tech scientists who came in, and I still talk to them about the way we can better the cameras, because they're not like normal cameras. It's like nothing I'd ever really, well, they're video cameras, but they take photos too. You know, the lenses were like mounted into missile housings, because the pressure down there is so strong you can't just send anything down there. The lenses are like chunky like this, so you have this kind of interesting thing going on. So we'd have the recovery, so every day we'd wait with bated breath for the footage, but it's 7 cameras and a 10-hour dive. So Dan and I would just sit up like speeding through. I found out that only 2 of the cameras were good enough really for what I could do, which was good. And so we were bringing up, I'm just going to show you this. Can you see that? In the film it's gold and it's like really magical and amazing and iridescent. And when they brought it up, it looked like that. It was pretty boring. And I'd been trying to convince the scientists I needed the help. I needed them to help me film, and been trying to convince them that image making in science is science. And if you can't communicate to people and you can't show people what it looks like when it actually comes out, because only so few scientists get to go down there and look at these things alive and happening. So when I was able to show them the video of this thing, just like incredible, it really changed everything. And since then I'm working a lot with these scientists, teaching them photography still. And these worms, which is in one little body, they can exist in 450 degrees, 2 degrees, water, gas, and something else. And that to me was so emblematic of this film, as I was really trying to explore that. This was the film shot in Borneo, which was in caves, very remote caves in a jungle, and I was looking at the men who collect birds' nests at the top of like 100-something metre ladders, and thinking about, well, what does it take to be able to do that? There's labour involved, but there's also ritual involved, and took about 2 years to meet someone who could help me go there, and we worked over 2 years together. I'm the only female that's been able to work in there with them and also film, and we worked very closely together, and it was my first experience of sound in ritual, like chanting. And so since then I've done a lot of science around altered states of consciousness with sound, particularly with a woman at the Heidelberg University. And that was shown at Palais de Tokyo. There's a couple of stills, and only last year I went back there to visit all of the men and to introduce them to my daughter. So, language sometimes is difficult, but at the same time we've become really close friends, and I think that's important, is friendship as part of these collaborations. This is another film that I feel like has been really important in my career, because I've shown it at some great institutions, but aside from that, it just changed. Like, it's a protest film, but without looking at one specific protest. It really speaks to people, and it's very empowering, and it just continues to be put into exhibitions and talked about, etc. And it's also been in museums. So this is Serralves Museum, where we did it live. And then I'll just go really quickly through the rest. So this is a film that I did of the termite mounds in Australia, in the desert. So it was only work I could really make during COVID. So we went dead centre of Australia, and I showed it in Saudi Arabia. the colours out there were really insane, and they made my camera bug out big time.
I've lost a camera out there.
Really hot, totally bugged out, and so I got some pretty amazing shots. It's also one of my first films. It is my first film I shot in France. It's also the first video that I sold, and I shot it at Mont Saint-Michel, around the sands around the Mont, and the man is struggling against the sound but communicating with me over the phone. It was shot during a blizzard, and you can really feel that in the work. And it was works like that where I was doing performance in the videos but didn't really realise, and so that's led to performance works like this. So I'm just going to go through quickly, but they're a lot to do with frequency and sound science, essentially, how it affects the body. And these are working tuning forks. So this again has been shown in lots of different places. And also one thing I think is special about this work, it was conceived from point of conception to be for performers of all abilities. So I'm working with performers who are deaf, who are blind, with cerebral palsy, because it's a work that you can feel, and everyone can feel. Okay, so it's a really special work for me. This is a work that's a breathing protocol that induces a kind of trance states. And I collaborated heavily with the woman that I mentioned in Heidelberg. So this one was in Manila. This is a Parsons student, an amazing Parsons student who performed in it in France. Had glassworks, and it was shown with the Centre of the Centre video. This was a performance at Palais de Tokyo, and it was shown next to the film shot in Borneo. And this was a big collaboration with Parsons, the students. We had 70 performers. I mean, that's crazy. And so they would perform on it 2 times a day, 6 days a week for 3 months. And it would really, this performance asks a lot. It's very strenuous, but it's an ecstatic trance induction, so it's also pretty enjoyable at the same time. And it's different instruments and sound that help induce the trance. This is another one with Parsons students at Palais de Tokyo as well, first commission for a Biennale of Sydney. And this one was 12 hours and I think we did it 2 days, so I can't remember. But that was great, that work. And then paintings, which I'm not going to go so much in, but I can just quickly show. I told you about them already. Yeah, that's it. So I'll just put in the background a video on. It's performance documentation and then goes into videos. So it's kind of the exact time you can ask me questions. So I'll just turn off the sound. Oh, you can hear this a little bit. We can just watch this a little. So this was just recently in June in New Zealand. So I will turn it down now. I didn't show you, there's some, I can show you really quickly. I wanted to show you, let me go into, so I've got a project with the Sydney Opera House. They've commissioned a new work, which is to produce new music. It's very exciting, and I'm not trained in music, but obviously I'm using it a lot, and I do feel really comfortable with it. I kept putting it into performances, and let me just start that for a sec. And so they've commissioned it. It's big performance work, and so it'll be performed by the Sydney Philharmonia Choir. We've got 400 singers, and it's a very strict protocol. So probably 3/4 of the composition is done. We had the first rehearsals 2 weeks ago, which was really nerve-wracking, thinking how it was going to sound, because there's a lot of science behind it, which doesn't always make for what you think will be easy listening, but it's actually really beautiful. And it's hard to sing. It's not your normal 12 notes. There's lots of micronotes. And yeah, I think it's so exciting to just have a new art form. You know, I think I'm always interested in new things, and so that's what's happening here. And the other one, I wanted to show you one I didn't get. So this was for the Australian Pavilion for Venice Biennale. And it was tuning forks, but glass, and I found that NASA found the first sound of the universe, and it's like an echo, and it's of a particular frequency, but the frequency is very, very high, so you can't listen to that. But I thought if I broke it up into 6 tuning forks, each tuning fork is its own frequency placed on the earth or somewhere off the earth, but when they were all hit together, they would make the frequency that I wanted, so the sound of the universe. And so this one in the front, I've been really wanting to look at an asteroid that NASA was able to land on called Bennu, and they found organic material that they believed was water, and so they were then able to hypothesize that water came to Earth through asteroids. And at the same time, I'm going to visit the oldest water that's ever been found. It's still there, and it's 1.2 billion years old. And it's like a kind of a salty soup. So I thought that was really beautiful to have 2 things speaking to each other like that. There's one of the heart, there's one in different locations. So I thought it'd be pretty great, but I didn't get it. But it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. So I'm going to London this weekend, hopefully to talk about somewhere else, maybe, or maybe one day it'll be in Venice.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.